Hi, this is the AI Storyteller. I'm Mark. In this issue, we are sharing a biography titled Freud, A Life for Our Time, authored by Peter Gay. We all know about Freud, the famous Austrian psychologist and founder of the psychoanalytic school of thought. One of his most significant works is the interpretation of dreams. Before delving into Freud's life, let's take a moment to learn about the author of this book, Peter Gay. Peter Gay was born in 1923 and once taught at Yale University. He was a rigorous scholar and authored numerous lengthy works on significant topics, such as modernism and the Enlightenment. In the 1970s, he worked at a psychoanalytic research institute, with Freud as the central focus of his work. This biography is a comprehensive work that integrates the psychoanalytic school, Freud's personal biography, and the broader historical context. It was published in the United States in 1988 and quickly received the National Book Award. One of the main advantages of Gay's biography compared to others is his access to the latest and most extensive source material. He persuaded Freud's descendants to provide many of Freud's private letters for his research, and he used an unprecedented number of reference sources. He strove to create a complete picture of Freud and describe the birth and development of the psychoanalytic school. The story of Freud is often told as follows: Freud was a genius, and without him, humanity would not have such a deep understanding of itself. Every aspect of 20th century thought was influenced by Freud. However, psychoanalysis is not truly a science, and Freud's ideas have become outdated. This statement is not entirely incorrect, but it oversimplifies the matter. In this biography of Freud, A Life for Our Time, we aim to provide a more nuanced perspective. We will divide the discussion into 3 parts. The first part covers Freud's early life, born into a Jewish family with many siblings. He also had numerous children, and much of his theory was based on self-analysis. The second part discusses Freud's work, particularly the interpretation of dreams and his research methods. His early works were essentially case analysis reports, which resembled real-life narratives. Psychoanalysis, from the beginning, appeared less scientific but highly imaginative. The third part addresses Freud's later years and his historical significance. Freud wrote extensively and continually revised his theories, helping us gain a deeper understanding of our inner selves. In this regard, his influence remains unmatched. Let's start with the first part, Freud's early life. Sigmund Freud was born on May 6, 1856, in the small town of Freiburg in the Austrian Empire. His father, Jacob Freud, was a Jewish wool merchant, and his mother, Amalia, was Jacob's third wife, 20 years his junior. The family's economic situation was modest, and they lived in an apartment above a blacksmith's shop in Freiburg. Jacob's son from his first marriage lived nearby, and this half-brother, close in age to Freud's mother, appeared more compatible with her. Surprisingly, Freud's nephew was 1 year older than he was. While such circumstances were not uncommon in large families, these childhood puzzles deeply affected Freud, and he repressed them for many years. By the late 1890s, Freud conducted psychoanalysis on himself and concluded that his half-brother from his father's first marriage had replaced his father as his mother's companion. His mother became pregnant and gave birth to his sister, who became his rival. His nephew, older than him by a year, became both his best friend and his greatest rival. Freud made the Oedipus complex, known to millions who had never read Greek tragedies, a household term. He saw ancient Greek tragedy as a perfect detective story and psychoanalysis as a partnership between doctor and patient, solving the enigmatic cases committed by the unconscious, with all the answers seemingly hidden in childhood and sexual experiences. When Freud was 3 years old, his family moved to Leipzig, and when he was 4, they relocated to Vienna. By the time Freud was 10, he had 5 sisters and 1 brother. Freud mentioned that he always cherished the rural scenery of Freiburg and didn't particularly like Vienna. However, for most of his life, he lived at 19 Bergasse, Vienna. He once hoped to travel the world on a ship, similar to Darwin, as this would align with his self-image as a knowledge explorer facing nature. Unfortunately, he didn't get to travel the world. Instead, he faced the unfathomable depths of human psychology and conducted groundbreaking research from his own home. Although his living conditions were somewhat modest, Freud received special attention from his family due to his outstanding academic performance. He had his own room, and the entire family made efforts to create a quiet atmosphere for his studies. Both his parents and teachers had high expectations for him, and he entered university to study medicine. In April 1882, at the age of 26, Freud met Martha Bernays, whom he referred to as the Little Princess. After a passionate courtship, they became engaged, but during their 4-year engagement, they were often apart, maintaining their relationship through letters. In these letters, Freud, much like a young man, described his work, life, immature aspirations, and his deep love for Martha. At the same time, he analyzed Martha's life from the perspective of a psychoanalyst. In one of his letters, Freud defended his cigar smoking by saying that if one couldn't kiss, smoking became essential. In those 4 years, their only intimate activities were kissing and hugging. It was during this time that Freud, now 26 years old, began to formulate some of his future ideas, including the notion that most psychological disorders originate from sexual desire, a concept rooted in his own experiences of unsatisfied sexual desire. He also stated that hunger and love are the true philosophies of life. In later years, he frequently used this idea to explain his theories, where hunger represented the driving force of the idea for self-preservation, and love was the sexual drive for the continuation of the species. It can be said that some of Freud's future ideas began to shine in his love letters to his fiancée. While finding a wife was relatively easy, gaining Martha's mother's approval was challenging. To secure the marriage, Freud had to ensure that they would maintain a certain standard of living after marriage. To achieve this, Freud abandoned his laboratory research work and became a doctor at the Vienna General Hospital. He then worked to climb the social ladder among doctors to secure a higher income. Due to the anti-Semitic sentiments prevalent in Vienna at the time, Freud's journey was not easy. He seized an opportunity to travel to Paris and study with the renowned physician Charcot. Charcot had deep knowledge of hysteria and used hypnosis in his treatment. He was also an excellent lecturer. These qualities greatly influenced Freud's later work. Charcot guided Freud towards the field of psychology. In the spring of 1886, Freud returned to Vienna from France and resigned from his position as a doctor. In the autumn of the same year, Freud gave a speech on male hysteria that positioned him in opposition to the entire medical community in Vienna. From then on, Freud embarked on his personal practice. In September 1886, Freud finally married Martha Bernays. Over the next 9 years, she gave birth to 6 children. Surrounded by the cries of babies and the everyday routines of changing diapers and feeding bottles, Freud developed the fundamental tenets of psychoanalysis. In 1900, he published his first major work, The Interpretation of Dreams, which sold only 351 copies in 6 years but garnered him a loyal following. Starting in the autumn of 1902, Freud held weekly meetings every Wednesday at his residence, where he and a group of physicians, along with interested individuals, discussed individual case studies of mental illnesses, psychoanalytic theories, and explorations of the self, forming what would become the famous Wednesday Psychological Society. The Wednesday Psychological Society initially had only 5 members but gradually expanded. However, as the number of participants grew, the initially harmonious discussions turned into heated debates. The topics discussed in the society often revolved around sexual matters, which frequently touched upon the most sensitive aspects of the human psyche. When these sensitive areas were probed, it often led to feelings of anger and hostility. Eventually, Freud was forced to disband the Wednesday Psychological Society and reorganize it as the Vienna Psychoanalytic Society. Subsequently, scholars from the United States, the United Kingdom, and Italy joined, increasing Freud's followers, and the influence of the psychoanalytic school continued to grow. In the preceding section, we briefly covered the first half of Freud's life, from his birth and family background to how he began his study of psychology, and the formation of the Vienna Psychoanalytic Society. In the second part, let's delve into Freud's early research. In 1882, Freud encountered the case of Anna O. for the first time, which can be seen as a cornerstone in the development of psychoanalysis. Anna O., a pseudonymous patient, was believed to suffer from a condition called hysteria, a prevalent diagnosis at the time. She was the patient of Freud's close friend, Dr. Breuer. Anna O. displayed various peculiar symptoms, including extreme emotional outbursts and erratic behavior, without any discernible physical illness. Dr. Breuer found that when Anna O. shared her story and allowed her emotions to be expressed, her symptoms temporarily vanished. He termed this treatment method as chimney sweeping or talking cure. Dr. Breuer informed Freud about this therapeutic approach, which greatly piqued Freud's interest. Based on his understanding of this case, Freud proposed his interpretation: the causes of hysteria are traumatic experiences and unpleasant memories. These memories are active forces residing in the subconscious mind. People suppress these forces into the subconscious as a means of self-preservation. However, this suppression does not make these forces disappear. They seek an outlet, resulting in patients manifesting their symptoms of hysteria. Freud decided to abandon the use of hypnotherapy and began conceiving a new therapeutic technique: free association. This technique involved patients openly sharing their thoughts and ideas without censorship, helping them re-experience traumatic events and release emotions for therapeutic purposes. This approach can be considered a unique form of conversation. As Freud applied this novel therapeutic technique to more patients, he gradually discovered that many of them reported childhood experiences of sexual trauma in their free associations. This led to the formulation of the seduction theory. According to this theory, hysteria's onset was attributed to traumatic sexual experiences during childhood. Freud faced significant criticism from the medical community regarding this theory. Over time, Freud himself abandoned the seduction theory, but he continued to use self-analysis, attempting to find the rules governing human mental activities by analyzing his own experiences and memories. Starting in the late 1890s, Freud examined and reviewed fragmentary memories, suppressed desires, and emotions. His primary tool was the self-developed technique of free association, and he heavily relied on his dreams as source material. However, the process of self-analysis was challenging, with no established standards, no predecessors to guide him, and no assistance from those around him. Freud had the support of one friend, a physician named Fliess. Their correspondence covered everything from moments of excitement and progress to times of frustration and stagnation. Freud confided in Fliess, and Fliess played the role of Freud's most attentive reader and commentator. In a letter to Fliess, Freud mentioned the Oedipus complex for the first time. He stated, "I have found, in my own case too, the phenomenon of being in love with my mother and jealous of my father, and I now consider it a universal event in early childhood." This assertion is akin to explaining the entire human digestive system based on one's own stomach condition. Who would believe that a young boy desires to destroy his father and engage in sexual relations with his mother? Such a claim is of interest only to erotic literature, and it is entirely irrelevant to real human life. Even if it were relevant, how could it be measured or ascertained? Consequently, Freud's theories seemed highly eccentric at the time, and his wife, Martha, even considered his so-called psychoanalysis to be a form of erotica. As Freud delved deeper into self-analysis, he gradually realized that he had become overly dependent on Fliess. He desired to free himself from Fliess's influence. In August 1900, their last meeting ended in a heated argument, concluding their friendship. In the same year, Freud published his work, The Interpretation of Dreams. In this book, Freud extensively explained how to analyze dreams using numerous examples. Freud dissected each element of the dreams, employing free association as a starting point. After analyzing over 1,000 dreams, he presented a universal principle: dreams are the fulfillment of wishes. In other words, dreams represent the desires residing in the dreamer's subconscious, which are disguised and enter consciousness after undergoing a certain internal censoring process. Through dream analysis, one can discern what desires drive the dream and what defense mechanisms are in place to reject or confront these desires. In the context above, two fundamental psychoanalytic concepts are introduced: libido, and defense mechanisms. Freud referred to libido as the life force, also known as sexual drive. Here, sexuality is conceived broadly, encompassing all forms of bodily pleasure. It is considered the primeval energy that propels individuals to engage in various activities, serving as the most basic force within the human psyche. Defense mechanisms, on the other hand, are processes through which the ego keeps frightening elements outside of consciousness to reduce or avoid anxiety. Freud mentioned that the most commonly employed defense mechanism is repression, where individuals suppress desires into the subconscious that do not conform to moral standards. Following the publication of The Interpretation of Dreams, Freud was disheartened by societal responses. The moral standards held by Europeans made people unwilling to accept his ideas. Even the medical community did not endorse Freud's theories. Paradoxically, this resistance from society proved the effectiveness of the defense mechanisms that Freud proposed. Nevertheless, the substantial criticism left Freud feeling depressed. In 1901, he decided to abandon all his work and, accompanied by his brother, embarked on a trip to Rome. This trip transformed Freud's outlook on life and gave him a new attitude towards society. Did the interpretation of dreams have any scientific basis? Unfortunately, there is nothing more tedious to most people than the dreams of others. If you want to bore your date, just tell her about your dreams from last night. According to Freud, dreams are filled with pieces of the jigsaw puzzle of our true selves. However, anyone with a serious disposition will not take their dreams too emotionally. Nonetheless, Freud was fixated on unearthing the most secretive and imaginative traumas in human lives. In the early 20th century, psychoanalysis gained recognition, and an increasing number of people sought to study under Freud. The field of psychoanalysis was moving from its infancy, developed solely by Freud, into a vibrant adolescence. Yet, as with every person's adolescence, it was filled with restlessness and rebellion. As psychoanalysis expanded, it was no longer solely Freud's doctrine and theory. People with diverse educational backgrounds joined, which gave rise to different interpretations. Freud's initial two followers, Adler and Steckel, eventually severed ties with him. Jung, whom Freud had great hopes for and designated as his heir, also went their separate ways. Just as psychoanalysis was flourishing, the First World War erupted. The war had a profound impact on Freud and his family's life. As the defeated Austro-Hungarian Empire experienced severe economic devastation and social turmoil, the Freuds found themselves in dire circumstances. Hunger and cold tormented the 60-year-old scholar. Fortunately, with the assistance of relatives, followers, and admirers, the Freud family was able to navigate this difficult period safely. The war prompted Freud to delve even deeper into the themes he had long been pondering, particularly the concept of death. He developed the concept of the death instinct, which complemented the life instinct, in this case, sexual drive. He used this concept to explain some of the dark and destructive behaviors of humanity. The death instinct manifests not only in brutal killings but also in everyday life, such as in joking insults, sarcastic remarks, or the adversarial nature of sports. According to Freud, the death instinct and the life instinct are two opposing forces, and together, they constitute the source of human energy. More familiar terms for these concepts are the death instinct and the sexual instinct. In the previous section, we primarily discussed Freud's early research during his middle years. Based on his studies of hysteria symptoms, he proposed the seduction theory, suggesting that hysteria resulted from early childhood sexual trauma. However, this theory faced criticism from the medical community. Later, through self-analysis and dream research, Freud published his seminal work, The Interpretation of Dreams, and psychoanalysis as a discipline finally entered a period of vigorous growth. Now let's move on to the third part of the narrative, covering Freud's later years. In 1923, Freud published another significant work, The Ego and the ID. This book focused on Freud's revisions to his own psychoanalytic theories and introduced the theory of the structure of the human psyche. According to this theory, the human psyche consists of three components: the ID, the ego, and the superego. The ID represents the most primitive desires and needs, seeking immediate gratification. The superego, on the other hand, represents one's ideal self, moral standards, or conscience, harshly monitoring one's behavior for compliance with these standards. Finally, the ego's role is to coordinate the interplay among the ID, superego, and the external environment, striving to satisfy the needs of the ID while adhering to the demands of the superego and the environment. Much of this interplay occurs in the unconscious mind. The theory of the structure of the human psyche marked the maturity of Freud's psychoanalytic theory and continues to be a cornerstone of psychodynamic psychology, a psychotherapy approach that emerged from psychoanalysis. In the same year Freud introduced the theory of the human psyche structure, he was diagnosed with oral cancer and underwent 2 major surgeries. As a result, Freud wore a large prosthetic upper palate that separated his nasal cavity from his oral cavity, allowing him to speak and swallow. However, the medical technology of the time resulted in a considerable size prosthetic, and Freud had to undergo frequent minor surgeries to remove tumors that recurred in his oral cavity to prevent cancer's return. These medical procedures caused him considerable pain and resulted in the loss of hearing in his right ear. In 1929, Freud completed Civilization and its Discontents. This work presented a concise yet powerful exploration of political psychoanalysis and formed part of Freud's larger conceptual framework. In essence, he argued that civilization represses both human sexual and death instincts. In 1930, Freud's mother passed away at the age of 95. Her death evoked 2 emotions in Freud. On one hand, he saw his mother's death as a release after a long life. On the other hand, he felt relief because his mother had feared that he would die before her. Freud felt he was now prepared to face his own death. Over the last decade of his life, Freud experienced a series of losses of close friends and family members, while enduring the torment of cancer himself. In 1938, under Hitler's terrifying rule, Austria was occupied by Nazi Germany, and the persecution of Jews descended upon Freud's family. Their property was confiscated, and their eldest son, Martin, and daughter, Anna, were summoned for questioning by the Gestapo. Concerns for his children ultimately led Freud to abandon any idea of staying in Vienna. With the help of numerous friends who pulled strings and provided ransom, the Freud family emigrated to the United Kingdom between May and June of 1938. In the UK, Freud received a warm welcome and was well cared for. However, this 83-year-old man was in declining health. On September 21, 1939, in accordance with an agreement he had with his personal physician, Freud was administered an overdose of morphine. He passed away at 3 a.m. on September 23, 1939, just as World War II was beginning. When Freud was a child, he once accompanied his father Jacob on an outing. During the outing, a person deliberately knocked Jacob's hat off, and Jacob didn't engage in a confrontation but simply picked up his hat. This display of his father's passivity incited anger in young Freud. From his youth onward, Freud exhibited a determined personality and physical courage. When his classmates teased him about his Jewish identity, Freud's response was one of resistance. He compared himself to Hannibal and Moses, both heroic figures who had important missions, confronted formidable adversaries, and endured challenging destinies. Due to his Jewish identity, Freud was ostracized by Vienna's medical circles during his youth, and he often habitually took the opposing side. People, in general, did not readily accept psychoanalytic theories, and this was partly tied to Freud's openness about his Jewish identity. While it is not accurate to say that only marginalized Jews can innovate new theories, Freud's work focused on significant dualities characteristic of Jewish thought, addressing themes of life and death, sex and death, past and present, illness and health. His work emphasized that nothing in life is self-evident, not even the facts of life. This perspective is also applicable to other important Jewish writers of the 20th century, such as Kafka. Throughout our lives, we avoid confronting the truth because the core truths, the terrifying desires, are too painful to bear. Subconsciously, we protect ourselves by concealing these truths, keeping them hidden from our fragile conscious selves. Freud questioned the conventional way we narrate our own lives and those of others, and he developed a unique method of interpretation that delved into the horrifying understanding of our dark inner spaces. He offered a fascinating interpretation of the human unconscious. Psychoanalysis is, first and foremost, not a therapy of words but an exploration of speech, exploring how to speak more honestly and effectively about those vexing things that are difficult to articulate. This is why Freud placed such importance on vocabulary, symbols, and narratives. As a result, the framework of psychoanalysis often appears more like a myth than a science. We rely on distorted self-interpretations to find our place in this chaotic world, and Freud's mission was to dismantle the interpretations, especially the distorted ones we formed during our childhoods. Psychoanalysis is neither traditional science, defined by empirical and measurable criteria, nor traditional literature. Speculating on what affects someone's mental state is not a scientific explanation. How could such speculations be validated? It's impossible. However, Freud's theories explained our inability to accept ourselves and showed that we are more complex than we may wish to believe. Now that we've covered Freud's life story, I hope you have a better understanding of this great psychologist. Let's briefly review. First, we began with Freud's early life. He was born into a large Jewish family, and his parents had high expectations for him. He chose to study medicine in college. Many of the ideas he would later develop began to take root during his youth. Early on, he focused on studying hysteria, which set him in opposition to the entire medical community in Vienna. It was during this time that he embarked on his career as a private psychoanalyst and established the Vienna Psychoanalytic Society. With a growing number of followers, the influence of psychoanalysis continued to expand. Next, we discuss Freud's middle years, which marked the period of significant academic growth in his career. Based on his studies of hysteria, he introduced the seduction theory, suggesting that the outbursts of hysteria were the result of early sexual trauma. This work created a rift with the medical community. Subsequently, through self-analysis and the interpretation of dreams, he published his core work, The Interpretation of Dreams. In this book, he concluded that dreams represent the fulfillment of desires. He introduced two key concepts in psychoanalysis, the drive and defense mechanisms. From then on, Freud's name was closely associated with sexual desires. The field of psychoanalysis also saw a period of thriving growth. In the final stage, we discuss Freud's later years. During this period, he published another significant work, The Ego and the ID, which introduced his structural model of the psyche, defining it as consisting of three parts: the ID, ego, and superego. The ID represents primal desires and needs, seeking immediate satisfaction. The superego represents a person's ideals, moral standards, and conscience, which it rigorously monitors. The ego's role is to mediate between the ID, superego, and the external world, striving to satisfy the ID's needs while adhering to the superego and environmental demands. These interactions occur largely within the realm of the unconscious. The structural model of the psyche, Freud's later development, is still applied in contemporary psychoanalysis, which originated from his work. In the same year that Freud introduced the structural model of the psyche, he was diagnosed with oral cancer and underwent 2 major surgeries. Following the surgeries, he had to wear a large prosthesis to separate his nasal and oral cavities. Due to the limited medical technology of the time, this prosthesis was quite cumbersome. To prevent cancer recurrence, Freud had to undergo frequent minor surgeries to remove tumors in his oral cavity, all of which caused immense pain. Additionally, Freud lost his hearing in his right ear due to these procedures. In 1929, Freud completed his work Civilization and Its Discontents. This concise and powerful book is political psychoanalysis, part of Freud's larger intellectual framework. In essence, he argued that civilization repressed both sexual and aggressive instincts. In 1930, Freud's mother passed away at the age of 95, which brought mixed feelings. He felt that his mother had lived a very long life and was now free from suffering. Simultaneously, Freud was relieved because his mother had feared dying before him, and he now felt prepared to face his own death. In the last decade of his life, Freud endured a series of losses of close friends and family members, while also suffering from cancer. Freud continually revised and refined his theories throughout his life. While his psychoanalytic theory has limitations in terms of research subjects and methods and does not strictly adhere to modern scientific standards, it still plays an important role in the field of psychotherapy. Freud's exploration of the human mind expanded the boundaries of human thought, and his ideas have influenced various intellectual movements of the 20th century. He helped us delve deeper into the mysteries of our own inner selves. Well, that concludes the content for this episode. If you enjoyed my video, please click like, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends. Thank you.